Leagues Cup kicks off in front of dozens of people. USL to Eugene, Oregon is official. And what does soccer media look like a year out from the World Cup? That and much more on Morning Kickaround. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Morning Kickaround. Jason Davis here with you, all by my lonesome, and that's fine. Producer Jenny is waiting in the wings. Robert Kerr is off doing vacation-y things because that's what summer is for. But we've got a lot to get into on today's show. Very excited to talk to you about American soccer. Of course, you heard our Rooster friends Peckinpah making his call for all of us to get into this. We've got a bunch of things happening. We'll remind you that this show happens Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. If you're watching live, you already know when it's happening. If you didn't watch it live, now you know when it's live, and you can join us on a future date. We've got lots of things you can do to support the show. First of all, subscribe to Morning Kickaround. That's the number one thing. You can also become a member, one of the MK Ultras. You get access to special posts. You get access to the Discord, which is a very cool community that is forming. I'm about to send out some of my gear. And because I'm by myself today, you get a bigger, wider shot of what's happening in the Davis studios here. Just a small selection of scarves, and there are many of them, 70 plus, I think, at this point. You can see some of the various promotional materials I've got. That's a Paramount ball with all kinds of stuff they had rights to. Maybe still do. I don't know. You can see some bobbleheads back there. All of that is up for grabs if you become an MK Ultra. You sign up, you ask me what you want, and I will send it to you. I promise you. It may take me a little while to get things together, but I will send you something from the studio. There's even a selection of books. I got a selection of soccer books back there that you can see. Spread the word for us as well. If you're already a subscriber, already a member, just let people know about Morning Kickaround. If you see a particular part of the show you like, maybe take that clip, that section, that segment of the show and share it somewhere, post it on your favorite message board. Maybe Reddit is a place for all of those things. I think we're up to just over 3,000 subscribers on Morning Kickaround, so the next target is 5K. I want to celebrate everybody who's already been a subscriber. Thank you very much for helping us get to 3,000. It is, we're in the early stages of this, and this is all going to kind of come together in a different discussion on the show today because I want to talk about soccer media in America. We also have a way that you can donate money to the show. If you don't want to do the recurring member thing, you can go to coffee.com/Morning Kickaround and give us a little bit of money. And if you want to just write us an email, let us know what's on your mind. You can do that at morningkickaround@gmail.com. All right. I've done enough promoting. We've got a lot to get into. Again, American soccer never stops and never sleeps. So let's dive straight in on a Wednesday into long balls. Shout out to my man, Jay Hunt, with the Lexington badge there. I am indeed wearing my Maryland Bobcats glitch kit. Maryland Bobcats, what's their status? They were NISA. They got booted from NISA. Got to go check on them. Maybe League for Clubs these days. It's hard to keep track. And I saw somebody in our Discord, by the way, the MK Ultras Discord, said, hey, can you explain some of the high amateur leagues? And we'll get to that. Today's not the day for that, but maybe at some point we'll dive into what's going with high. That's about Maryland Bobcats. Maryland Bobcats, a professional outfit, or was. League for Clubs is not professional. It's all confusing. NPSL, UPSL, USL League 2, all of those things. We'll dive into that. So again, awesome community over in the Discord if you want to join up and be part of it. But long balls here on a Wednesday. Let's start with what happened last night. The Leagues Cup kicked off. I know you're excited. I know you're thrilled about the Leagues Cup. Maybe because of this massive summer of soccer we just had with the Club World Cup here and the Gold Cup happening for the U.S. men's national team and CONCACAF nations. Congratulations again to Mexico for winning that thing. I'm not mad about it at all. Maybe you forgot about the Leagues Cup. Maybe you forgot it was coming. Maybe you didn't remember that there's a new format. And we're going to talk about the Leagues Cup and what it means and whether it can last a little bit later. But just diving in to the results from last night. Here you go. Now you're going to see draws here, but then over there to the left, you can see it says Penn because CF Montreal and Club Leon played to a 1-1 draw over 90 minutes, and then they went straight to penalty kicks. That's what's going on in this year's edition of the Leagues Cup. Games that are drawn after 90 minutes go straight to penalty kicks, and then there is a split of the points because of that. If you lose the penalty kick shootout, you get 1 point, as you would have gotten for the draw. If you win the penalty kick shootout, you get 2 points. Is this kind of like, I'm not paying attention to the NHL, but I have a feeling this is kind of like what hockey does with their shootouts these days. I don't know. It's producer Jenny's good.
It's what the NHL does. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
2 points for a shootout win and 1 point for a shootout or overtime.
All right. That's why she's there, to help us out with these details. So again, just a casual hockey guy didn't remember if that was the case. 2 points for a shootout win, 1 point for a shootout loss, 3 points obviously for a straight up victory. So Montreal with 2 points, Leon with a point. Toluca beat Columbus in their shootout, so that's 2 points and 1 point. NYCFC played off the pitch essentially at Red Bull Arena by Puebla. Tigres plays Houston off the pitch in Houston. Los Angeles FC, LAFC, 1-1 against Mazatlan. Mazatlan won that penalty kick shootout. I think after 11 rounds, they went 11 rounds before Mazatlan picked up the 2 points and LAFC got the 1. And then Pachuca beating San Diego FC last night in San Diego. So rough introduction to the League Cup for San Diego. You see that red card. Andres Dreyer picked up that red card in added time at some point. So that's going to be a problem for San Diego in this competition. Tonight's matches, if you are so interested, Inter Miami kicking off their defense of their title. That's not true. They're attempted a second title in this competition against Atlas. Necaxa and Atlanta United. Pumas in Orlando City. Minnesota United Querétaro, which I believe now has American ownership. Minnesota United, I just said them, and Querétaro. CF America, Club America, and Real Salt Lake, and the Portland Timbers up against Atlético de San Luis. Now, the excitement level for this, I think, a little bit muted. You could see it in the stands. It certainly didn't look like there were a lot of people in Columbus when I was checking in on that game last night. And I'm not sure I blame anybody. I mean, where is fan excitement supposed to be for this competition that kind of comes along, doesn't really fit into the history of the league? Obviously, it is now, again, when we'll talk about the format later, all about MLS versus Liga MX, and yet you are playing against teams from your own league, or you competing against teams from your own league in order to make the knockout phase. And if you do need a refresher on the format, and why wouldn't you? It's a brand new format. The teams are separated into 2 leagues. Liga MX, Major League Soccer. All right, no problems there. We can all understand that. 18 teams from MLS, by the way. Those are the MLS playoff teams from last year, plus San Diego, minus Vancouver, but plus San Diego. Vancouver, because of other things, is not playing in this competition, but San Diego is. I know. Already, we're sort of undermining the competitive integrity of this tournament. So again, no MLS teams will play against each other, and no Liga MX teams will play against each other in the first phase. And you play 3 games in your first phase against a random grouping of teams from the other league. The teams that finish top 4 amongst their domestic peers will then go on to the knockout phase. Are we following this? Are we on board with this? No. You know, I actually had a chance to talk to the guy who's now the director of the league. If you were like, oh, the Leagues Cup has a director? Yes, indeed. His name is Tom Mayo. He's a former long distance runner for Great Britain in the Commonwealth Games. That's his background. And now he's in, sports organization. And he's the guy that's in charge of trying to make this thing matter. And this move to put MLS teams versus Liga MX teams, just to make that the feature of the first phase, is clearly just doubling down on this rivalry between Mexican football and North American. I mean, American, but there's obviously a Canadian team representing Major League Soccer in Montreal. So the American teams plus Montreal, they get that thing we always knew that was the major goal here of this Leagues Cup format was, and again, with MLS All-Star games now being MLS All-Stars versus Liga MX All-Stars, this is just that attempt to partner and take advantage of a rivalry really born out of USA versus Mexico in men's international soccer. And I don't know that it still has the same power that it used to have. Like, I don't know if it's there. So we will maybe talk a little bit more about this later on in the show. Jay Hunt saying it's not a novelty anymore. Obviously, a Tuesday night, that's a tough lift for any MLS team. And this is the point about Vancouver. Canada Soccer has a spine, doesn't let MLS out of the Canadian Championship. All right, so there's that as well. And look, again, we are talking about two competitions in MLS and Liga MX that cannot do a whole lot more because of their geography. So if you are in that situation, right, and I'm not saying that it's wise for these leagues to always think of themselves as in competition against, say, European football or even South American football. But I do think that if you are thinking about how do we grow, how do we get some international prominence, how do we take some of the fans who are very into the UEFA Champions League or into Copa Libertadores or whatever, how do we make them fans of our competitions? How do we grab their attention? And that's what's going on here, right? This is about trying to figure out a way to push beyond the limits that are placed on these leagues because of where they are geographically located. And barring MLS teams being invited to the Champions League, which ain't happening, or Mexican clubs doing the same, I don't know what they can do. Now, they could play in the Copa Lib, and maybe that's something that comes down the line. It seems as though rather than that, which is obviously a logistical nightmare, they would rather do this. We'll talk more about this coming up in the show and the larger future of the Leagues Cup. Long ball number 2 on a Wednesday. Thomas Mueller is going to the Vancouver Whitecaps. At least that's the reporting. Tom Bogert. I actually believe Manuel Vet of Transfer Market was the first one to have this. In fact, Transfer Market went ahead and put together the graphic that shows Thomas Mueller in the Vancouver Whitecaps shirt. He hasn't put this on yet. This is not real. He has never worn this shirt, but this is what we do, right? As soon as a player is linked and as soon as it looks like it's happening, we get these pictures. It says imminent from Transfer Market. So shout out to Manuel Vet. And then that story picked up by Tom Bogert. I believe even Fabrizio Romano was posting about this. Muller's 35. You see it right there in the parentheses. He's 35 years old. He comes off that incredibly successful career with Bayern Munich, all the trophies won, all the goals scored, all the things that he's done. I am a fan of Thomas Mueller, of his game, of his attitude, and I absolutely think that will be a boon to Vancouver, sort of regardless of what he ultimately contributes. I think there are some questions around how does he make Vancouver better? I just mean, like, every player that arrives, you have to ask that question. How does Thomas Mueller make Vancouver better? And we are talking about one of the top teams in Major League Soccer in 2025. I mean, Vancouver is not a team that screams, we need this guy in order to compete this year, in order to, say, make a playoff push. Vancouver is already lined up to be a high seed in the Western Conference, barring a collapse. Right now in second place, 45 points, a point back of San Diego with a game in hand on San Diego FC. And they're sort of nominally in the Supporters' Shield race, of course. And a lot of this has been driven by, now, Pedro Vite moving on, that's definitely a thing that Vancouver's having to deal with. But Sebastian Berhalter in that midfield, Brian White, the two U.S. internationals have been obviously key to this. So when you bring in Thomas Mueller, what role does he play? Are you asking him to sort of be a number 10? He's sort of always been more of an off striker kind of player, a second striker. Can he play that way with Brian White? What is the dynamic there? Those are interesting things for Jesper Sorensen to figure out for the Vancouver Whitecaps. And it is, you would rather have that problem than not. This is a formative change in the approach that the Vancouver Whitecaps have taken to team building in their MLS history. I mean, they've never been a team that has been connected to sort of big flashy names. I can't remember if maybe we've had a little bit of a dalliance here or there or something that didn't come to fruition. But this is certainly the biggest name that they've ever signed. I think it's interesting that Thomas Mueller at 35 is willing to go play on that turf at BC Place in Vancouver, because from what we know, that is one of the worst surfaces in Major League Soccer. I don't know if he knows exactly what he's walking into there. Now, obviously, this story also comes with everybody being reacquainted with the MLS discovery process. And that is that has been a discussion point for a number of years. Here is the rule as it is written on the MLS website. Pursuant to the discovery process, clubs may scout and sign players who are not yet under contract to MLS and who are not subject to another assignment mechanism, like the Super Draft. To sign a player through the discovery process, the club must first place the player on its discovery list. A club may have up to 5 players on its discovery list at any time and may remove or add players at any time. There's no limit to how many players a club can sign from its discovery list. Expansion Club San Diego actually got 2 more slots in 2025 up to the roster compliance date, and then they got that reduced to 5. This is the rule as it is written. There are some other things involved, obviously, in this. What always strikes people as odd is that Major League Soccer is saying you need to put a multiple trophy winner, a German international, a player with a resume as deep as Thomas Mueller, a player everybody in the world football is aware of. You have to put them on your discovery list. You have to do something that makes it feel like you're discovering them. And I understand the frustration with this because it is incongruent with the terminology. But I'm going to bring up something that I saw on Blue Sky from our friend Andrew Wisnowski, who has been a previous guest on this show. Look, I responded to it at the top, but you can see it in the middle. MLS is terrible about its terms of art, right? This is just the words they use to describe things within the rules. Discovery had nothing to do with special discovery, which is a totally different mechanism that allows clubs to amortize transfer fees and things like that. The allocation list had almost nothing to do with general allocation money. Generation Adidas players are wholly unrelated to the Generation Adidas Cup. Now, that is marketing stuff about Adidas that I do think is ugly and not easy to understand, but maybe slightly different. But Andrew says this is a nightmare. And down there, read that down, that's that reply to himself. Just call, actually, this is a reply to me because I was saying that MLS doesn't have to do it this way. Right? It doesn't have to be this arcane. It doesn't have to be this difficult to understand. And even if you agree that MLS has budget rules that make sense in order to maintain a competitive field of teams, right? When you go into the season, you have some belief that your team can do something good, even when they are poorly run, because there are playoff spots and parity is a part of the MLS structure. Debating parity is a different conversation, but even if you believe that those are good rules, the way MLS makes it difficult to understand them is an impediment to people becoming big-time fans of this league. I really believe that. I really believe that you create an environment where I've got to read the rules and I've got to dive into these arcane mechanisms and terminology in order to understand it. Needlessly complicated. That's right, Chris. Chris says it's needlessly complicated. Now, that's exactly what this is, right? Andrew saying, just call discovery negotiation priority, and 75% of the complaints would be gone. Now, again, there are certainly a lot of people who would say, you don't even need that. You don't even need negotiation priority. You shouldn't have that. Why not just let players sign with whoever they want and let teams make their offers, and the player will pick the best offer, and that's it. It's all done. I am at that point that the evolution of Major League Soccer has taken us to a point where that should be the next step, right? Or something that is a loosening of some of these rules that are always meant to restrict the labor market so that a player can't just play one team off another. It took a long time. If you're old enough, and you can tell by the white in my beard that I am, you remember when MLS did not have free agency. It did not exist in Major League Soccer. A player's contract would end, and they could not sign with anybody else if they wanted to. And again, that was all about Major League Soccer saying, we don't want players to be able to drive up their price by going to one team and saying, well, this other team's going to give me this much. If you want me, you got to pay me more than that. Because controlling labor costs was central to the way that Major League Soccer was designed back in the mid-90s and started in 96. And it's why single entity exists. It's why that concept of single entity was created. Because as long as MLS is one business, they cannot be accused of anti-competitive behavior within the league because all of the teams are part of the same company. And that way they could say, you can't go out into the marketplace and drive up your price. I do think they need to change at least the terminology if we're doing this. And this is a good point. MLS players are still officially signed with MLS, right? That the ITCs are held by MLS. The clubs don't have individual contracts. The clubs are operators. The team, the player is assigned to the club by the league. Even if there's really no, even if we're just talking about sort of like the paperwork of it, and it really isn't in terms of the way it operates, different than a team signing with the player signing with the team. It definitely is that. MLS is communism. This is an interesting thing to talk about. It's not as a business, but it is within itself. So now we're peeling back the layers of the onion. Is there a specialized MLS lawyer degree? Asks Angus. That's a good question. We should bring Andrew back on the show and see if there's something about that. I do think that in terms of sports law, MLS is a wrinkle that is difficult for some people really to kind of put into the bigger picture of doing sports law. So there's that. All right. We are, again, here on a Wednesday episode of Morning Kickaround. Long ball number 3 is MLS 3.0. Fits the theme today of talking about MLS and the way it operates. Now, I was not able to do the show last week after Don Garber spoke about MLS 3.0 in Austin. I know Robert and Jenny discussed some of the things that Don Garber said in Austin. But what stands out for me, among the talk about changing the roster rules, which we just touched on that. Will things like the discovery process disappear under a new plan, MLS 3.0, and all of those things? Some of the stuff that Don Garber talked about are very intriguing. The calendar switch is probably the biggest fundamental change that MLS could do. I mean, that's going to completely change the business of soccer for them. And I am fascinated by why they think that's such a good idea, what the thinking is behind that. But this is the other part for me. Competition format innovation. Don Garber saying, we've got a really exciting formula. We'll be ready to present once we go through all the formalities of it, which, by the way, I imagine is talking to the players, right? So you're going to execute a calendar switch, which requires the players to be on board. And in that process, you're going to change your competition format. But man, we have no inkling at all. As far as I can tell, most of the reporting on this is just presenting Garber's words and then breezing past it, because I don't think anybody has a sense of what MLS is thinking around this competition formula as Garber describes it. So I'm curious, and I definitely want our viewers, the MK Ultras, to tell me what you might imagine this to be or what you would prefer it to be in a perfect world. He says that they're going to align more with the rest of the world, right? That it's going to be something that's familiar on some level. But he also said the playoff structure is something that is not currently in place in any sport in North America. It'll be more aligned with the rest of the world in terms of how they play their competition. And I think our playoff format will be really cool, really unique, very different from anything that happens in North America. Now, this, again, being an old timer, somebody who's worked in soccer for a long time and obviously been a fan, this got me thinking about something that was presented by a friend of mine, Brian Strauss, when he was writing for the Sporting News, I want to say 15 years ago, something like that. He presented an idea for the MLS Cup playoffs that would involve a group stage. So very much like a World Cup, that you qualify for the playoffs, and then once you reach the playoffs, you are placed into a group, a World Cup style group with 3 other teams. And then getting into the further rounds requires earning enough points in the group stage to move forward. Now, this can get very granular and very detailed. And if you do a search for, say, MLS playoff format, or put Brian Strauss's name in the search field, you will find these articles. There's one at Fox, which I believe was a Grant Wall piece that presented some of Brian's ideas in a different way. Brian himself wrote this at the Sporting News, and I believe he also wrote about it at Sports Illustrated when he was there. Grant Wall talked about this consistently when he was at Sports Illustrated. So what are we talking about here? Now, I don't know that you can separate the regular season format from the playoff format because Garber's talking about both these things changing. If you've got 30 teams, then I think there's at least some sense that MLS could keep going, although Garber did not commit to that in Austin. He talked more about stadiums coming online for places like NYCFC and that kind of stuff. Then he did talk about expansion, which is maybe interesting because MLS has been so focused on expansion for the last 20 years. But if you got 30 teams, you got 15 teams in each conference. If you play a balanced schedule within the conference, that's 28 games. That's not enough games for a regular season. Now, suppose if you just say, well, we're going to do that, and then we're going to have some crossover games. And that way you can still, have a New York LA match or whatever it is that you want to get, Miami versus LAFC, that kind of stuff, right? If you think that that's important for the business, then you might still have 6-8 games to play with in terms of your regular season. But that unbalances the regular season a little bit, right? Now everybody's not playing the same teams home and away as it would be in a single table format, which I think just because that's how my brain works and I'm a little OCD like that, I love the idea of a single table format, even if you have to split it into conferences, because that's a measure of a team over the season. Now you can still do playoffs. And I do think as Americans, we should accept that we do playoffs, and playoffs are a fine way to determine a champion. But you want to also make sure the competitive integrity of the playoffs is good, right? That these teams have the teams that finished higher in the regular season standings are rewarded for that in a way that makes sense. That you're not talking about too much randomness in the system. This is something that Brian was very focused on when he conceived of his group stage idea, is to push away some of the randomness that comes with a one-off playoff format, a knockout style, which is dramatic, but sometimes ends up with teams that are not as good beating teams that are better and it not feeling right. Now, we can go back to last year. Now, obviously, it was over multiple games because MLS, in a bid to provide inventory to Apple, which is what we all believe is happening here, went to this 3-game format. Don't like it. I think it's weird. It doesn't feel like soccer. Right? And I know that that's an arbitrary decision on my part in how I view it, but it doesn't feel like soccer to me. It does. MLS did do something similar way back in the day when it had 8 teams and 10 teams. Now we got 30. Why are we doing 3-game series in one round before we go to knockout style? But of course, Atlanta beat Miami. And you could just say, well, Miami didn't bring it. Miami didn't have the right focus. Miami didn't do the right things. They mishandled it. But it doesn't feel right that a ninth place team knocks off the Supporter Shield points record holder in the MLS Cup playoffs. So could a group stage work? Now I'm going to leave it to you to go into again, because it gets granular. Like Brian Strauss's idea included having the top seed play all their games at home. So all 3 of their group stage matches will be at home. The second team in the group will get 2 home matches, obviously one of those away to the top seed. The third and fourth place teams, or the third place team rather, would get 1 home game, and then the fourth place team will get 0 home games. Have to go on the road. So that really loads up the advantage for finishing higher in the table. And then you play that group stage, again, 3 games, and hopefully you can get that done in a week. Right? In the League's Cup first phase, these teams are going to play 3 games in basically a week. They're going to play midweek now, on the weekend, and then midweek next week, and then they go into the knockout phase. And you could do something similar with the playoffs. Now, again, how the calendar switch affects all of this is an interesting consideration. And I do imagine that the talks are ongoing. The MLS collective bargaining agreement expires in 2027. The league will probably be targeting that year for whatever changes it wants to make to its format via calendar, via playoffs, via regular season. So I think that's probably where we're headed. Those kind of things have to be taken care of. And again, we are not talking about a little change. We are not talking about tweaks here or there. We're not talking about adding another DP slot, which is something people clamor for. We're not talking about getting rid of roster designations, which is something the Players Association definitely wants, so that more money can be spread across more of its players. We are talking about fundamental, ground-shaking changes to the way Major League Soccer has operated for the last 30 years. When you spend 30 years, and by the time we get this change, it could be 31, 32. When you play 30 years on the schedule Major League Soccer has played, that creates habits. Now, maybe we could argue MLS hasn't broken through to the mainstream, and there's lots of reasons that can be the case. their decisions, their mistakes, the culture, sports in America. But even if you haven't broken through, quote unquote, you still have lots of people who have become fans of this league who are used to you playing in a certain way. Now, the playoff format has changed a billion times. Nobody's accustomed to that because we never get a time to get adjusted, but it is something to consider. All right. If you are not a subscriber to Morning Kick Around, become one now. Hit the button. Be a subscriber. Get notified when we're live on the air or when a new video goes up. We didn't do a live show on Monday because Robert was on vacation and I was doing radio, but I did post a conversation with Simon Evans from the Soccer Business about some of these MLS 3.0 things that came out of Austin. It's a very interesting conversation. Simon knows his stuff. So if you were a subscriber, you would have known that that video dropped, even though we weren't live on Monday. You can also become a member, become an MK Ultra, get access to the Discord, get access to bonus content. I've taken to posting what I call the Daily Davis on the Morning Kick Around YouTube channel for our MK Ultras only. That's a little daily missive where I spit out a couple things that are on my mind. Sometimes it involves my life and what it's like being me, I guess. I don't know why anybody would really care, but sometimes you got to get it out. So it helps me with that. So you can be a member and listen to me rambling and respond to some of those things. Sometimes I want that to be a back and forth. If you would like to give us a little bit of cash, but not do it through YouTube, you can go to coffee.com/morningkickaround and support us there. That is a great way to get us to our goal on Coffee, which is to be able to do a live remote show in 2026. We're saving up money, collecting money for that. That is the campaign over there. So go check that out. If you want to send us an email, you can do that at morningkickaround@gmail.com. Great way to just reach out and we'll respond. And I did mention socials, but we've got that too. Kickaround is what you need to look for. It's obviously a lot of letters. So Kickaround, X, Instagram, Blue Sky. I did create a TikTok, but we haven't posted yet. So that could be coming if you're on TikTok. Just got to figure out how to make videos. Right? We're going to do that. Okay, we're going to do that. And I also didn't mention that we're a podcast. You can listen to us via podcast wherever you get your podcasts, because sometimes watching video is not safe, or you just don't want to see people's faces, I guess. So you can get that there. All right, let's just pause for a quick moment because we got more to come. When we come back, we're going to really dive in to the Leagues Cup, what to make of it, and what its long-term future might be. Hot topic on a Wednesday. Jason Davis with you on Morning Kick Around. We talked about results, right? We talked about what happened last night in Columbus and New York or I guess Jersey, technically speaking. San Diego loses. Montreal gets a penalty shootout win. That means 2 points. So weird, but that's what they did. Leagues Cup has started, which means now we have to kind of take stock of what it is and where it might be going. And we're in year 3 of a real Leagues Cup. We had some teaser events that were called Leagues Cup before that first edition. And of course, you'll remember that first edition was marked by the arrival of Lionel Messi in the summer, joining Inter Miami, hitting that free kick in the very first game he played for Miami in the Leagues Cup. It kind of gave us this sense that, hey, this can be a thing. Now, if you are cynical, if you've been around American soccer, you know that everything is sort of manufactured and feels like a money grab, and we really can't get away from some of those feelings. And I am definitely sympathetic to the idea that this thing is worthless. It's concocted. It's an annoyance. It breaks up the schedule. It's not good. Last year, we did a full month pause in the MLS season in order to play the Leagues Cup. And that felt like an imposition. That felt like something we really didn't need and was only going to complicate the campaign for a lot of teams. But look, by the end of it, when the Columbus Crew were lifting the Leagues Cup trophy, they felt really, really good about it. It was a moment of celebration in a sport where there are only so many opportunities to win something. I mean, I guess in soccer, you could argue there are more opportunities to win things than in most sports, certainly in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. There's only one trophy worth winning, because there really aren't any other trophies. Soccer does provide those opportunities, but still 30 teams, add 18 to the Leagues Cup from Mexico. You're talking about beating out 47 other teams to be a champion of something. And if you've ever watched a Premier League team on a barnstorming tour in preseason, there's a trophy for everything. Trophies have different levels of importance. And I think it is sort of like up to a team or a fan base to decide how you're supposed to feel about it, right? Okay, here's a Crew fan, Andrew Johnson. As a Crew fan, that night was great, right? You felt like you achieved something by winning a Leagues Cup. But I think that part of our problem here is that while MLS and Liga MX are playing around their sandbox, we're not really able to get a sense of how to feel about this over multiple years. And every time they mess with the format, every time there's a change, every time there's a tweak, and this is not just true of Leagues Cup, it's also, I think, true of MLS and its playoff structure. Every time that happens, it takes a little bit away from the past of the tournament, from the history of the tournament. It makes it difficult to connect what's happening now or this trophy you win in 2025 to the one that Columbus won in 24 or Inter Miami won in 23. Right? There's no longer a clear connection. It shares the name, it's the Leagues Cup, but is it the same tournament? And now here we are with a different format. And again, MLS isn't pausing. Liga MX has just started their season. I do believe that their teams will play the group stage. I mean, that's the thing. It's not a month-long stoppage of play. Not every MLS team is involved, of course. Only 18 are taking part. So there are 12 teams who are not even involved in this competition. They have now shifted from the group stage, which we've had the last couple years, to this league phase, which kind of doesn't even, that nomenclature kind of doesn't even work. Phase 1 is actually what it's described as in the documentation that I read, the explanation of the format. So you have all the Liga MX teams in one table, all the MLS teams in another table. They will play across league 3 games. Top 4 teams in each league will move on to the knockout phase, at which point you will be able to play a team from your own competition, if that's how it works out. Now, again, this may be sort of a practical solution to the problem of playing too many games. Like we can say that, throttling this down a little bit is probably a good idea. Right? Last year was too much, too many games, all kinds of things that, weren't really beneficial. And I suppose that's what differentiates Major League Soccer, and I would say Liga MX, from a lot of competitions around the world. Because everything is new, certainly for MLS, everything is somewhat new. The league is 30 years old, but lots of teams haven't played those 30 seasons. Very few, in fact. The vast majority have only been around for part of that history. So you're adding teams, you're constantly trying to figure out what's the best approach. And yet, I'm always struck by the fact that as long as, again, you are constantly shifting the sands under people's feet, they'll never feel comfortable. They'll never get used to it. There isn't a through line. The habits aren't formed. And as we ponder whether or not Major League Soccer is going to flip its calendar over, this is especially pertinent right now. So they bring in Tom Mayo, who is a former long-distance runner, ran for Great Britain at the Commonwealth Games in 2002, is what you can read about Tom Mayo. He comes in and he is now the director of the Leagues Cup. He's the guy responsible, supposedly, for making this thing matter. He's been tasked with fixing it. Fixing the turn. So, first of all, was it broken? I mean, what I mean was, did we care about it enough that if it was broken, we think it needs fixing? I think that's maybe a way to phrase this, to frame it up. Like, is it so important that we need to keep doing it? Now, at the same time, if you just dump it in the trash, then you'll never figure out if it's possible to turn it into something that really matters. Now, look, again, this is also the reason MLS and Liga MX want to do something like this is because the CONCACAF Champions Cup doesn't deliver, and obviously it's outside of their control in terms of the finances, in terms of the money that comes in, but that doesn't deliver the same kind of return that they want out of some international competition. Right? This is obviously a function of all of these leagues and governing bodies trying to gather. It's like hungry hippos. Right? The little balls are running around the table and everybody's trying to chomp as many balls as they possibly can. And so for Liga MX in Major League Soccer, who don't control the CONCACAF Champions Cup, who see that tournament oftentimes until the latter stages as not nearly as powerful a mechanism for growing their brands, here's this thing that, we'll partner, we'll do it in the summer, we'll squeeze it in. All the games happening in the United States of America, which again is I think a thing that undermines the competition that lots of people point to. Like, how can this be a legitimate competition with a trophy that we should feel like matters if all the games are only being played in one country? Now, I'm going to bring in Chris's comment here. He's an ultra. Shout out to Chris. Leagues Cup should, in my opinion, be a second-tier competition for the CONCACAF Champions Cup that should have 8, 12, or 16 teams total from Liga MX, MLS, and CPL. Winner gets a spot in next year's CONCACAF Champions Cup. We're talking about Europa League approach. So Chris is identifying this as a potential fix to a problem of not having a second-tier competition in CONCACAF, because we have the CONCACAF Champions Cup, but we don't really have anything secondary. Now, this obviously would, if it's just Liga MX, MLS, and the CPL, would leave out all of those other leagues, Costa Rica, Honduras, Panama, El Salvador, all of those teams will be left out. But if you do see room for that, and you don't think the Leagues Cup should be in direct competition with the CONCACAF Champions Cup, which it effectively is only because who is down at the wire at the end? Who's in the final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup every single time? Major League Soccer, Liga MX. Obviously, Liga MX always wins it. And again, that makes it difficult to sort of parse the importance of the Leagues Cup when we watch the Champions Cup play out and Liga MX teams always win at home. And then you flip this over and you're playing it in the very, very, very early stages of the Mexican Apertura. Teams are barely getting their feet wet in their seasons. And then you're like, hey, you got to go to the U.S. and you got to play these MLS teams that are 25 and 26 games into their campaigns. Now, again, is this a tournament that can stand the test of time? When I talked to Tom Mayo on the radio, he was on SiriusXM FC with me and Jack Collins yesterday. He said that they're thinking 30 years, right? They're not thinking about, this is a thing we're doing this year and then we'll reset. And then they're thinking we want to create something that is important 30 years from now. Now, words are cheap. And of course you're going to say that if you're the guy in charge of the competition. Why would you say anything else? You're going to undercut your efforts to make it matter by saying, well, we just want to make this tournament interesting now. Is it important? This is a big question for us as soccer fans. Is it important that the Leagues Cup have a stable format that replicates from year to year to year in order for it to matter, in order to feel important? How important is playing it in Mexico in addition to the United States? Or as Jack Collins said when I was working with him and when he talked to Tom Mayo, what about the idea of sort of flipping the country that hosts the tournament? Like, rather than have it be we're crossing the border all the time for games, why not be, this year it's all in the United States, next year it's all in Mexico? Now, again, if it isn't just about money, you might consider that. But if it's about money first and foremost, if the competitive integrity of the tournament is secondary to making as much money as possible from it, then you're always going to play the games in the United States. Because there's more money to be extracted from fans in America than there is in Mexico in this competition. I mean, I'm not even sure. Actually, I would be fascinated to see how Mexican fans respond to this. There are some clubs that fans would show up no matter what. Whatever their team is doing, they'll show up. But there might be a lot of fans who just pass on this. I mean, a lot of people in Columbus, a Tuesday night in the summer. It's hot, it's sticky, there's thunderstorms all over the place. You're playing against a team you don't know a ton about if you're a Columbus fan. You might have heard of them. Not to say they're not knowledgeable, but we're not to that point yet, right? So I think there's lots of things on the table for the Leagues Cup that are interesting. If you have any thoughts, can this stand the test of time? Will it last 30 years? We'll be talking about this 10, 15, 20 years from now. Remember when Columbus won it? Remember when Miami won it? Let us know in the comments. We're going to pause. I've done all the plugs. I'm going to do more plugs later, but we're going to pause because I have a very interesting conversation to open up with you after something I talked about on a different podcast. And that's the big question today. Is the United States, is soccer media in America, in the U.S., ready for the 2026 World Cup? All right, I'm back. It is morning kick around on a Wednesday. I had a chance to go on the Sounder at Heart Nos Adietis podcast on Monday with Jeremiah O'Shan, and they do as good a job as anybody of covering a single team in American soccer. Sounder at Heart has been doing it for a long time. I think probably 15 years at this point. Jeremiah and I had a conversation about American soccer media. He invited me on to really ask a question, and I'm going to bring it over here to Morning Kick Around as well. And that question involves whether or not American soccer media is ready for the World Cup in 2026. Now, I think for me, the easy answer to that, and we'd be done here, and I'd have to end the show if I didn't expound on it, would be no. I don't think so. But there's also a lot going on sort of in that question, and it has a lot to do with where we are as American soccer, like what that even means. What is American soccer media? Now, I don't want to be too navel-gazy about this. I don't want to make this about me, although again, Jeremiah had me on because I've been doing this since I started my blog in 2008. So I have something of a perspective. I've done the amateur blogging thing. That's where I got my start. I started an independent podcast. I then started a web show. I've worked for big corporate entities covering soccer. I've written for ESPN. I've had my stuff published all over the place in terms of writing. I've obviously been on SiriusXM FC for 10 years. That's a massive corporation who does a ton of different things content-wise and has a soccer channel. So soccer isn't central to what they do, but it's a part of what they do. And so you break this down. Yeah, you break this down into what kinds of soccer media we've got in the United States. You got corporate stuff. Right, so ESPN covers soccer. They've got ESPN FC, which is largely video content. They've got writers. Jeff Carlisle is one of the OG American soccer reporters. Love what he does. Glad he's still there doing it. You got Ryan O'Hanlon, who writes on analytics and various things for ESPN. That's not always American soccer, what Ryan writes, and there are obviously lots of people at ESPN who are writing about non-American soccer. You got The Athletic, which is obviously part of the New York Times now. They let Pablo Mueller walk, which is an insane thing to do, if you ask me. But they've got Paul Tenorio, they got Felipe Cardenas, they've got Jeff Ruder. Those are American soccer writers writing on American soccer. I'm glad they have a whole home for that. They have some podcasts I don't know about The Athletic. I just hung out with Taylor Rockwell, who does the Total Soccer Show. They're part of The Athletic, but even he was like, I'm not, he was like, we're just there, but it doesn't seem like they are pushing us. They're just part of the Athletic family of things. And I think that really kind of speaks to the piecemeal approach that a lot of these organizations have taken to American soccer. And I am specifically talking about American soccer because The Athletic now, and I think Pablo Mueller leaving The Athletic is part and parcel of a shift of focus at places like The Athletic, which started out with having beat reporters on every beat. That was their whole hook. What happened to that? They've got British editors over there now. Now, a lot of things are passed through a British sensibility and British coverage. And obviously they're very focused on the Premier League and breaking stories, David Ornstein, and all these things, right? Transfer stories and whatever else The Athletic is covering. And they do a very good job of that. I'm glad that, I pay for my Athletic subscription, even though I'm done with the New York Times, because of writers like that. Now, again, it's sort of like, is it just a second thought for the Athletic? Or is it a focus? Fox has got, obviously the TV guys. Alexi Lawless does his podcast there. You've got Doug McIntyre writing at Fox these days. These are the big corporate operations, right? Then you've got things like Men in Blazers and their network, and there's a lot of American soccer over there. If you have been paying attention to the internet, you know that Kickback Media just launched, and that involves SoccerWise, which is a very MLS-focused podcast, and they do some women's soccer with Jordan Angeli. They've got a plan. I actually talked to the guy who founded that company the other day, and they've got a plan, and that's very interesting. Hopefully it works, right? They are focused on the American soccer fan, and they have a multi-pronged approach that I find fascinating, that, something I've thought about. Like, how do we connect with fans who are new to the game in a way that doesn't scare them off? Now, obviously, what we have right now, also in America, also around the world, but I think it's a major driver of things in America, is completely independent coverage of the game from a lot of DIY types. Now, again, I started as a blogger and a podcaster, making my own stuff in my house, learning how to do that. That's very much the same ethos that runs through YouTube, for example. I mean, we're here. We're independent. There's no corporate backer. Love to have some people come in and support us, but we're not backed by any corporation. This is an independent effort. This is me and Rob and Jenny putting something out 3 times a week because we think there's space for it, and because we get to talk about things that other people don't talk about. Did I forget to talk about USL Eugene on the show today? I think I did. I missed that. We'll come back to it. But you obviously have a ton of YouTube creators. A lot of them I don't even know. Like, every now and then somebody will pop up on my feed that's got 1 million followers, a million subscribers. And I'm like, really? I had no idea that there was an American soccer channel on YouTube that had 1 million subscribers. And maybe that's on me for just not being aware of the ecosphere. But I also think it's just a function of how much stuff there is. There's so much stuff out there on YouTube in particular. Podcasts, ubiquitous in our lives, everywhere. I should absolutely mention, I mentioned the Total Soccer Show already. They've been going for 15 years, as long as I've been around. Taylor has been around. The Protagonist, right? That's a very solid outlet that covers lower division soccer from an independent perspective. I should mention Backheel as well. Backheel does a good job covering the lower divisions with John Morrissey, and obviously they've got MLS coverage and American U.S. men's national team coverage and stuff. And I guess what I'm kind of getting to is it's very niche. American soccer media is focused on individual topics aimed at specific fans, specific audiences. Like that, and that's better than nothing, right? Certainly it's better than nothing. Certainly, and it's you could argue it's much better than it used to be. Right? That we have moved into a world where people can make a YouTube channel or start an independent media organization and do okay. It still feels like it's all very fragile, right? As long as the money is small, as long as there isn't a lot of sort of real investment behind it, all of this could go away tomorrow. Or individual shows, I mean, it's all just about what your willingness to do the work. Like I spent years independent, making a little bit of money writing and podcasting, and having a day job. And the only reason I'm here today is because I just never gave up. I never quit on it. I never got to a point where I said I'm burned out, or it's not delivering enough, or the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It feels like we're maybe still in that world. Like we're still there. That's kind of still the mentality. It's just taken a different form. I do think that things have kind of shrunk a bit, at least if we're talking about the big operations. If we're talking about what is, I think we all had this sense that American soccer media was going to evolve to a place where it was very important to cover American soccer for the likes of ESPN and Fox and those kind of organizations. And it doesn't feel like that's the case. Now, maybe the pandemic has slowed things down a lot. I think, my relationship with ESPN ended because of the pandemic, largely. They just cut a lot of money because things were just different. And I was one of the people that didn't get to keep writing at ESPN. And, I'm trying to figure out how I feel about my writing these days. I have a newsletter. Have I mentioned that? Go look for Jason Davis Soccer Eagle and you'll find me on Ghost. I like writing for myself rather than writing for other people. So that's a good thing for me. But, there are fewer people writing. There's fewer jobs out there. It still feels like we haven't grown the professional ranks of American soccer people. And I'm frustrated by that. Like, I'm a little saddened by that. And I also, like what you like. I also don't love the fact that it seems as though a lot of money and attention and partnerships are going to people who are, what's the word I want to say? Opportunistic when it comes to American soccer. That they showed up, they brought a different culture with them, and instead of American soccer people trusting Americans to do soccer and us to make it our own in 100% complete cultural ways, we turn to other cultures and say, oh, how do you do it? Let's do it like that. Or that is the thing that gives people a sense that it's better. Right? That there's a little bit of that, right? The idea that you are a little more legitimate in your fandom because the kind of soccer you like or the people you listen to come from a place where the game's more established. And I think that is interesting. Now, in terms of MLS, we got to talk about Apple before I run out of time. Apple and the deal that Major League Soccer signed with Apple has put MLS behind a paywall that restricts access and means that MLS struggles to be part of a general conversation. I said this when I went on Jeremiah's podcast, and please go listen to it. Support Sounder at Heart. I'm not sure that conversation is the same as it used to be, and I'm not sure if MLS would actually benefit that much from being available in a way that could conceivably mean it's part of a wider sports conversation. Like I think it'd be fairly simple to argue that the path that is available to MLS is limited by the fracturing of media in the world we live in. I mentioned the niche stuff, right? I know some of you guys are talking about how big YouTube is. Billions upon billions of people watching YouTube. Biggest broadcast outlet on the planet. And yet we're not talking about funneling those people to a few things or even 1,000 things or even 1,000,000 things. We're talking about in aggregate billions of people watching billions of videos. And if you talk about American soccer, there's no general conversation because it's a fractured environment. Even if you like the same thing as somebody else, you might watch different YouTube channels. You might consume different content. So how do we have a collective conversation? Now, X used to be the way to do that. X has lost its power for a lot of American soccer people. Some of you are probably still on X. I'm not. I think Blue Sky is trying to move on in that direction. I do think it's interesting that Kickback Media has partnered with Blue Sky because they're trying to make something happen there. But it all feels like we're just starting over, that we hit the reboot button on all this. And we are, less than a year away from the World Cup. Now, in terms of investment in the game from companies that want to maximize their reach with soccer fans, I don't think that's coming, or I don't think that's going to happen until we get closer to the World Cup. The draw is December 5th for the World Cup. That's just been announced. By the way, same weekend as MLS Cup Final, so that's interesting. MLS Cup Final on the 6th, the draw on the 5th in Vegas. So there will be a lot of soccer things happening. Will that be a problem? If you want to go to the draw, probably going to be tough to also go to MLS Cup. Linear TV's role in all this is certainly something to think about. I don't know. Again, there's no sort of universal theory here as what we're doing in terms of what we're doing. We just have a fractured American soccer environment. And I think my sense of this is that so much of the traditional media that covers other sports and makes it feel like those sports have a unified conversation is resting on a foundation that was laid 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And this is sort of just an echo of that. And because, look, there's been an explosion of content around those other sports too, but there's still a couple of places that feel like the central hub for discussions about those sports. Major League Soccer, American soccer, definitely throw in the USL, NWSL. We don't have a hub. We don't have one place or two places or three places. ESPN has never really mattered in the same way it does for college football, for the NFL, right? Any of the big outlets, none of them made soccer their own in a way that felt like that was the hub. That was where everybody went for that's who was driving the conversation. If you are an NWSL fan, you may never interact with the same outlets that cover men's soccer in America. And I wouldn't blame you either, right? You want somebody who cares about that subject matter. You want somebody who knows what they're talking about. I mean, we could talk about this for hours. Your thoughts on American soccer media right now. Obviously, you guys are consuming Morning Kickaround. Thank you for that. If you're not a subscriber already, what are you doing? Hit the button, please. Please become a subscriber. Support the show. You can become an MK Ultra, become a member of the channel, get some perks, just a couple bucks a month. Access to the Discord. You can get access to the swap meet where I'm giving away all my stuff. I'm giving away my stuff, except for that plate right there. That's my kid made that for me. You don't get that plate. That's Tiago's hands and feet. You don't get Tiago's hands and feet, but you get everything else if you want it. That's a Tiago Alcantara pop guy. What do they call those things? I actually don't know. Somebody give that to me because my kid's name is Tiago. That's the only reason I have that. But you can have it if you want.
Pop figurine or something like I think it's pop figurine.
Hold on, you jumped in and you don't know? They're just called pop.
No, they're pop figurines. My sister-in-law collects.
Oh, Funko Pop. That's what I was looking for. Funko Pop.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you,
also,
John.
one more thing going back to the MLS soccer media. Is it really going to be that hard to attend the World Cup draw and the MLS Cup final? They're probably going to be in the same place, like within a day of each other. That's just my prediction.
You mean what? I'm sorry. Oh, I see.
The MLS Cup final will probably be on a Sunday night, and the night before will be the World Cup draw in like the same city.
Oh, the World Cup draws in Vegas. We know that for a fact.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
So there's no team in Vegas. Vegas can't make the MLS Cup final because they don't exist.
I'll go
one day maybe. No. That's that you didn't know, and I didn't tell you, and now I'm telling you. The draw for the World Cup. Of course, it's happening in Vegas. Of course, it's happening in Vegas. And like, no disrespect to Vegas. I like Vegas. But that is, I don't know. It just doesn't, they do it in a city that's got a team. Do it in a city that's got, I don't know, something. It all feels very icky. All right. Give us your comments on soccer media. Again, support the show. Become a member of the MK Ultras. Get access to the Discord and all that. Coffee.com/Morning Kickaround, as you can see on the screen, is where you can you can contribute to our fund to get out amongst the people. We want to do a live remote in 2026, so we're raising money for that. You can also hit us up on Gmail. Let us know what you're thinking about with American Soccer, morningkickaround@gmail.com. We are encouraging manifestos. We are actually encouraging you to write a manifesto if you haven't already and send it to us, morningkickaround@gmail.com. I want to do like a compendium of manifestos. Like, I want to be like the central hub of American soccer manifestos right here. I think that would be incredible. Yeah, I'm sure I'm missing a couple other things. A podcast. We are a podcast. You can listen to us be a podcast. Just search for Morning Kickaround, and you will find us. It is also maybe beneficial to the show if you go to Spotify, and you can watch the show as a video podcast on Spotify. Yay, do that. That is a thing you can do. I want to shout out all of the ultras. So obviously Jay Hunt's been involved in the show today. Chris Sal says he just finished writing his manifesto. How fortuitous that I am asking for manifestos. I see a couple of ultras in here. Oh, here we go. Crispy Doo 44 is an ultra. Talking about the media situation. What is a big thing these days? That there will be people on various platforms that have large audiences that do not break through to be known outside these places. So that's part of the media discussion. Shout out to Crispy Doo for being involved in today's program. Again, be like those gentlemen, those people, and become an MK Ultra and support independent soccer media. There you go. Angus, also an ultra. I can write a new manifesto every day. Angus, if you have that type of time, maybe be part of the team here at Morning Kickaround, because it feels like you could be helping us instead of writing manifestos. All right, that's going to finish it up for us here. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Morning Kickaround. We'll be back very soon with a new episode.